Well, I'm going to do bi-weekly updates most likely because I just had all my classes. I dropped one of my classes. I no longer have four. I now have three. I dropped fish and wildlife conservation because it was the only class I had on Friday, and my finances are not as strong as I wish they were. So the extra money will be good. It'll help the transition period. But I've had my three classes already, and to be honest, I am quite excited about each and every single one of them, even economics. Thank goodness. This is gonna be part of my studying practice. I'm just gonna repeat things I thought were interesting out loud, and if I'm consistent, and methodical with this, then this series of videos will be perhaps fascinating in 50 years. Yeah, hope I make it that long. Life goals, by the way, 900 years. I think it's possible. Let's do it. Alright, so the first class I had was on Monday, and it was Women in Art. And at first I was a little bit nervous because I thought the focus might be too heavy on modern feminism. But luckily I think the teacher's a bit old school. I think she has to play the game to keep her job. But I suspect that we're going to be focusing on mainly classical art interpretation analysis, which will include mainly all the classical artistic components, which include shadow, lines, negative space, color, light, all those good things. So hopefully it won't be too much about all the messed up things that have been done to women last 10,000 years. Because yes, it's important to know about, but dwelling on it just causes me stress. I don't like to think about people suffering all the time. Something we talked about that I thought was useful that I want to follow up on. It's a book called Wild Mind: Living the Writer's Life by Natalie Goldberg, and there's a list of 7 writing skills or things to keep in mind when one is writing to make it better, to make the process more enjoyable too, and more successful and interesting. 1, keep your mind moving. All right, that's not hard. 2, lose control. All right, also fun to do, very healthy, surprisingly, because I am obsessed with self-control, and that's not healthy. You gotta have balance. You gotta let go of yourself sometimes. Number 3, be specific. Yes, I think the idea that she was telling us about was use more good adjectives and describe things in more detail, so it forms more of a visual image. Show, don't tell, maybe is part of that. 4, don't think. Done. 5, forget grammar, spelling. I'm more likely to forget handwriting, but grammar and spelling I think are very important. I don't want to be reading my writing in the future and be like, bro, just spell it right the first time, or just say it right the first time. All right. Number 6, you're free to write trash. Good. 99% of what I write will be trash anyway, so I'm glad I'm free to do that. Number 7, go for the jugular. I don't think she means that literally. I think the idea is to really show yourself in your work. Like if something is like really messed up and you feel like you don't want to write about it, and just in vivid detail, like they said. And that class was pretty good. I don't want to get into too much of the specifics of it, but I'm really excited for it because not only are there quite a few cute girls in the class, but we're going to go on field trips to the Portland Art Museum and to other art galleries around Portland. And I freaking love field trips, like Magic School Bus. If we could have a field trip every day, that'd be heaven, right? Like, that'd be too much. So that should be good. And yes, there will be a focus on the class of studying the history of how women have been discriminated against in society and these kinds of things. So that should be interesting. From a personal spiritual standpoint, I think that class will be just a good old goddess worship session symbolically. You know, it'll just be all about admiring the divine feminine. So that should be cool. The next class I had yesterday, so the first class was on Monday, second class is Tuesday, Wednesday, and it was Principles of Microeconomics. And I just told Patrick this, but basically the guy is like a, I don't know, mid-50s dude. He has a 17-year-old son apparently. So that's what I'm calculating according to, you know, his gray hair and things. Still pretty youthful and young. And he walks in carrying a motorcycle helmet in one hand and dressed in full like leather motorcycle protective gear. Very unconventional economics professor. So I think I've like hit the lottery, you know, hit the jackpot in this, because according to him, there's very few schools of economics in the U.S. that teach something called pluralism or something. I don't know. I like heterodox as opposed to orthodox. So counter norm, counter culture, counter standard. He teaches heterodox economics, and the difference is that most economic schools, especially in the U.S., they teach something called neoclassical economics, which involves people like Adam Smith and John Stuart Mill. You might have heard of him if you've read anything nonfiction, probably. So we're not going to be focusing on those because those guys are basically responsible for all the justifications for the current economic system that kind of just ravages different economies and exploits all the wealth. It's like, I don't know if they're directly responsible, but all the economists that love the modern system or say how awesome it is say that these guys are awesome. So I assume that if you're the friend of my enemy, you're also my enemy. So I'm glad we won't be focusing on that. Instead, we're going to be focusing on the other schools of economic thought, which are apparently 8 others, 9 total. Good number, right? That's all the numbers there is. No more than 9. And so the other schools are classical, which came before neoclassical. You might be surprised to learn. The Marxist school, we're going to get into a lot of that probably. You know, Portland loves Marxism. Developmentalist, no idea what that's about. Now this one I'm the most excited about, the Austrian school of thought, because there's this guy on Facebook who claims that he's going to be like the new emperor of Earth. And most people in the comments of his post were kind of, you know, making fun of him, saying he's crazy, delusional, etc. But just in case he's like describing the future, I suggested that I could be like the minister of the economy, of finance or something. And he said, yeah, that's fine as long as I study the Austrian economic model. So I got my homework from another enterprise in that regard, so I'm excited to look into that. Oh, by the way, this is what my notes look like, in case you're curious. The next one is called Schumpeterian, which sounds horrible, and I hope we never talk about that, because it's just stupid. It's a stupid word. Anyway, Keynesian is the 7th one, and Keynesian I've heard a lot about. I bet it'll be interesting. 8, institutionalist, sounds pretty dry, not gonna lie. And then behavioral, which also sounds pretty dry, but less so the institutionalist. We talked about how kind of those schools of thought can be organized into three main categories. Wait, I didn't finish the story. Like, the professor walks in carrying a motorcycle helmet and leather motorcycle gear. And the first thing he tells us is, I've recently discovered that I love riding a motorcycle because it allows me to break laws at my discretion, is basically what he said. And I really like that he's honest and countercultural or counter-normative. So I think that this class, Principles of Microeconomics, will be fascinating because of that. And then, so that was earlier this morning. And I don't have notes on the third class because it's technical writing. And most of the class we just discussed the syllabus. I do want to print out the syllabi, so I have those in case the internet goes down or my battery dies or something. And but technical writing, surprisingly, is one of the classes I'm most excited about. Honestly, I'm like equally excited about all of them somehow. But technical writing will be excellent because the professor is also a woman, younger than my first female professor, pretty attractive, which is always a plus. And she's a professional writer, and she specializes in writing screenplays. In fact, she teaches screenplay writing, and that, of course, set off a bunch of alarms in my head. Not alarms, notifications that I will definitely have to study screenplay writing, because although my mom has studied it and she's recommended the important texts to really become a good screenplay writer, my learning style in that, I feel like collaborative will be a lot more interesting. I always have ideas for screenplays, but they never get past the drawing board. It'd be really interesting to just go through the whole process and be guided by the hand through it. That'll be really good, and I'll play into later things, hopefully, because making movies, yeah, I mean, you're here right now. I love recording stuff and this medium. So, but the class in itself will focus on just making the writing as chef's kiss as possible in terms of expertise and accuracy, succinctness, hopefully. Just making the writing as professional and fantastic as possible without getting into things like creativity and, the concept of the story. No story, just describing what is, I think, is the idea, right? But anyway, I'll find out later in the term. And so those are my three classes. Yeah, I'm excited. I already wrote my 200-word essay for my class tomorrow. I wrote it like an hour after I got home, first day. Only thing I got to do tomorrow is print out the copy of the essay so I can share it in class, which will be a little bit scary because I was extremely honest and I ran out of words, and so hopefully I'll be able to add a little bit of context in my presentation. But if I don't, they're going to see a very clear distinction between my psyche and the average psyche. So that should be, or the average purported psyche, because I think everybody thinks like, I think everybody thinks alike, just some people deny it. They don't admit the fundamental primitive thoughts that we all have. Yeah, so I guess I'll make another update when I feel like it.